Hello, first graders, and welcome back to Social Studies with Mrs. Miller. Today in Lesson 6, we will be talking about responsibilities in school. Do you remember from our last lesson? What is a responsibility? I want you to turn and tell somebody next to you what a responsibility is. What does that word responsibility mean? If you're at home, share with somebody in your house, or you could even share with a pet or a stuffed animal. If you're at school, I want you to share with somebody that you're sitting next to. I'll give you 10 seconds. Ready, set, turn and talk. Stop, look, and listen. So let's see if you came up with a definition that's similar to my definition. A responsibility is a duty that you have or something that you must do. For example, citizens have the responsibility to follow the law. We're going to listen to this story, Horton Hatches the Egg. This story is about Horton, who's very, very responsible. As we're reading, I want you to think about how Horton is responsible in this book. Horton Hatches the Egg by Dr. Suess. Sighed Maisie, a lazy bird hatching an egg. I'm tired and I'm bored, and I've kinks in my leg from sitting, just sitting here all day. It's work. How I hate it. I'd much rather play. I'd take a vacation, fly off for a rest, if I could find someone to stay on my nest. If I could find someone, I'd fly away free. Then Horton, the elephant, passed by her tree. Hello, called the lazy bird, smiling her best. You've nothing to do, and I do need a rest. Would you like to sit on the egg in my nest? The elephant laughed. Why, of all silly things, I haven't feathers, and I haven't wings. Me on your egg? Why, that doesn't make sense. Your egg is so small, ma'am, and I'm so immense. Tut, tut, answered Maisie. I know you're not small, but I'm sure you could do it, no trouble at all. Just sit on it softly. You're gentle and kind. Come, be a good fellow. I know you won't mind. I can't, said the elephant. Please, begged the bird. I won't be gone long, sir. I give you my word. I'll hurry right back, while I'll never be missed. Very well, said the elephant, since you insist. You want a vacation? Go fly off and take it. I'll sit on your egg and I'll try not to break it. I'll stay and be faithful. I mean what I say. Toodaloo, sang out Maisie and fluttered away. The first thing to do, murmured Horton. Let's see. The first thing to do is to prop up a tree and make it much stronger. That has to be done before I get on it. I must weigh a ton. Then carefully, tenderly, gently he crept up the trunk to the nest where the little egg slept. Then Horton the elephant smiled. Now that's that. And he sat, and he sat, and he sat, and he sat. So how is Horton acting responsibly here? What has he done so far that shows that he is a responsible character? Would you please whisper what you're thinking into your hands? Ready, set, go. I'll flip back through the pages to refresh our memory. Okay, eyes on me. So let's see. So he props up first of all, he agrees to take care of the egg for Maisie, who's too lazy to take care of the egg herself. Then he props up a tree to put the egg in. And then he climbs up the tree and he sits in the nest to keep the egg warm. Let's keep reading. This is kind of a silly story, isn't it? And he sat all that day, and he kept the egg warm, and he sat all that night through a terrible storm. It poured and it lightened, it thundered, it rumbled. This isn't much fun, the poor elephant grumbled. I wish he'd come back, 'cause I'm cold and I'm wet. I hope that Maisie bird doesn't forget. Do you think that Maisie is very responsible? Doesn't seem like she is very responsible, right? She hands her responsibility over to Horton. But Maisie by this time was far beyond reach, enjoying the sunshine way off in Palm Beach, and having such fun, such a wonderful rest, decided she'd never go back to her nest. Oh, she is certainly not very responsible, is she? So Horton kept sitting there day after day, and soon it was autumn. The leaves blew away. And then came the winter, the snow and the sleet, and icicles hung from his trunk and his feet. But Horton kept sitting and said with a sneeze, I'll stay on this egg and I won't let it freeze. I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. Wow, he sure is responsible. You could see that he's taking this responsibility very seriously. He's sitting on this egg through all of the different seasons, even during the winter when it's really, really cold. So poor Horton sat there the whole winter through. And then came the springtime with troubles anew. His friends gathered round and they shouted with glee, Look, Horton, the elephant's up in a tree. They taunted, they teased him, they yelled, How absurd! Old Horton the elephant thinks he's a bird. They're not being very nice to him. They laughed and they laughed, then they all ran away, and Horton was lonely. He wanted to play. But he sat on the egg and continued to say, I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. No matter what happens, this egg must be tended. But poor Horton's troubles were far, far from ended. For while Horton sat there, so faithful, so kind, 3 hunters came sneaking up softly behind. This sounds like trouble. What do you think might happen? He heard the men's footsteps. He turned with a start. 3 rifles were aiming right straight for his heart. How scary. Did he run? He did not. Horton stayed on that nest. He held his head high and he threw out his chest and he looked at the hunters as much as to say, Shoot if you must, but I won't run away. I meant what I said and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. But the men didn't shoot. Much to Horton's surprise, they dropped their 3 guns and they stared with wide eyes. Look, they all shouted. Can such a thing be? An elephant sitting on top of a tree? It's strange, it's amazing, it's wonderful, new. Don't shoot him, we'll catch him. That's just what we'll do. Let's take him alive. Why, he's terribly funny. We'll sell him back home to a circus for money. And the first thing he knew, they had built a big wagon with ropes on the front for the pullers to drag on. They dug up his tree and they pulled it inside, with Horton so sad that he practically cried. "We're off," the men shouted, and off they all went, with Horton unhappy 100%. Poor Horton. Up out of the jungle, up into the sky, up over the mountains, 10,000 feet high. Then down the mountains and down to the sea went the cart with the elephant, egg, nest, and tree. Then out of the wagon and onto a ship, out over the ocean, and oh, what a trip! Rolling and tossing and splashed with a spray. And Horton said, "Day after day after day, I meant what I said, and I said what I meant, but oh, am I seasick 100%. After bobbing around for 2 weeks like a cork, they landed at last in the town of New York. "All ashore!" the men shouted, and down with a lurch went Horton the elephant, still on his perch, tied onto a board that could just scarcely hold him. Bump! Horton landed, and then the men sold him. So even after all of this, Horton continues to sit on the egg. Would you say that he's acting very responsibly? He sure is. He's taking his responsibility for caring for that egg very seriously. So I wonder what will happen at the circus. Let's find out. Sold to a circus, then week after week, they showed him to people at 10 cents a peek. They took him to Boston, to Kalamazoo, Chicago, Weehawken, and Washington too, to Dayton, Ohio, St. Paul, Minnesota, to Wichita, Kansas, to Drake, North Dakota. And everywhere, thousands of folks flocked to see and laugh at the elephant up in a tree. Poor Horton grew sadder the farther he went. But he said as he sat in the hot, noisy tent, can you read it with me? "I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. He's still keeping his promise after all this time. Then one day, the circus show happened to reach a town way down south, not so far from Palm Beach, and dawdling a long way up in the sky, who of all people, who do you think this will be? Think it's Maisie? Let's find out. Who of all people should chance to fly by but that good-for-nothing bird, Runaway Maisie, still on vacation and still just as lazy. And spying the flags and the tents just below, she sang out, "What fun! Why, I'll go to the show." And she swooped from the clouds through an open tent door. "Good gracious," gasped Maisie, "I've seen you before." Poor Horton looked up with his face white as chalk. He started to speak, but before he could talk, there rang out the noisiest, ear-splitting squeaks from the egg that he'd sat on for 51 weeks. A thumping, a bumping, a wild, active scratching. "My egg!" shouted Horton. "My egg! Why, it's hatching!" "But it's mine!" screamed the bird. When she heard the egg crack, the work was all done. Now she wanted it back. "It's my egg," she sputtered. "You stole it from me. Get off of my nest and get out of my tree." Poor Horton backed down with a sad, heavy heart. But that very instant, the egg burst apart, and out of the pieces of red and white shell from the egg that he'd sat on so long and so well, Horton the elephant saw something whiz. It had ears and a tail and a trunk just like his. Take a look at what hatched out of the egg. Doesn't it look a lot like Horton? And the people came shouting, "What's all this about?" They looked and they stared with their eyes popping out. Then they cheered and they cheered and they cheered more and more. They'd never seen anything like it before. "My goodness, my gracious," they shouted, "my word. It's something brand new. It's an elephant bird." And it should be. It should be. It should be like that. Because Horton was faithful. He sat and he sat. He meant what he said, and he said what he meant. And they sent him home happy 100%. Oh my goodness. Is Horton a responsible character or what? Can you please turn and tell the person next to you what makes Horton so responsible? What are the things that he does throughout the story that make him so responsible? I'm going to give you 10 seconds to share with someone near you. Ready, set, turn and talk. I wonder if you're thinking what I'm thinking. I was thinking, well, for one, he took on the responsibility of caring for somebody else's egg. That's a big responsibility. He sat and he sat on the nest, even when it was freezing cold outside, even when the hunters came after him, even when he went to the circus, even when he was stuck on that ship, he never gave up and he kept sitting on that egg. He took his duty to that egg very, very seriously, and he kept his promise, right? Now, I thought we could get up and do a little movement activity before we talk more about how we can be responsible like Horton in school. So would you please stand up behind your chair and push in your chair? All right, so let's first pretend that we're elephants in honor of Horton the elephant, who's just so responsible. Okay, so we're going to turn our arms into a big long trunk. And can you bend down and swing your trunk from side to side like you're an elephant? Oh, that feels really good, doesn't it? Okay, now next, how about if we pretend that we're a bird? Can you take your wings out to the side like this and flap them? Move side to side. Flap those wings. All right, great job, everybody. Let's sit back down. All right, everyone. So first graders, nobody's going to ask you to take on the responsibility of sitting on somebody's egg. But in school, students and teachers both have certain responsibilities. So let's talk a little bit about what those responsibilities are. Let's first think about student responsibilities. What are some responsibilities that you have as students? Can you name 3 across your fingers? When I say go, I want you to name 3 across your fingers right now. Ready, set, go. One responsibility that I have as a student is to... Another responsibility I have as a student is to... One more responsibility that I have as a student is to, okay, eyes back on me. Let's see if we had any of the same ideas about student responsibilities. So let's see, students' responsibilities include following the rules, following school rules. That's very important, right? We all have a responsibility to follow those school rules and our classroom rules. Remember how we made that class constitution? Well, we have the responsibility to follow the classroom constitution. Another responsibility that students have is to do their work. And when you're doing your work, do you think Horton, let me ask you a question. Do you think that if Horton had schoolwork to do, that he would just say, oh, I'm just going to get this work done and get it in? Or do you think that he would work really hard and try his very best on it? What do you think? Yeah, I think he would try his best on it. He would work really, really hard, right? So one of your responsibilities as a student is to do your very best work. Another responsibility that students have is to listen to their teacher. We want to make sure that we're always listening to our teacher so that we do our best learning. Another responsibility is to clean up after yourself. We would never want somebody else to have to clean up after us, right? No, not as first graders. We're big kids now. We know how to clean up after ourselves. We can take on that responsibility. And last but not least, participate in class. Well, what does that mean? Well, we raise our hands to answer questions. And when your teacher asks you to turn and talk, you make sure to turn and talk. Guess what? You're not the only one at school who has responsibilities. Teachers have some very big responsibilities themselves. I have this little song that I'd like to sing with you. It's called Teachers. And it's sung to the tune of Mary Had a Little Lamb. So would you sing it with me? Okay, ready? Our teacher comes to school each day, school each day, school each day. Our teacher comes to school each day to help us learn and grow. She smiles and she helps us learn all day, learn all day, learn all day. She smiles and helps us learn all day. We're glad we come to school. I wonder if you could think about a responsibility that teachers have. Can you name one responsibility that teachers have? When you have an idea in your head, touch your head. Okay, now I want you to share your idea with somebody next to you. I'll give you 10 seconds to share what you think is one responsibility that teachers have. Ready, set, turn and talk. All right, time's up. Let's see if you came up with any of the responsibilities that I listed. So teachers' responsibilities are, well, teachers have many, many, many responsibilities, but these are 3 of the main responsibilities that teachers have. So teachers have to help students learn, right? That's a teacher's first priority. Teachers make sure to help students learn. Did you say something like that? Teachers also have to prepare lesson plans. Many times teachers type up their lesson plans, but every lesson that you are taught was planned ahead of time, including this lesson that I'm teaching you right now. Another responsibility of a teacher is to talk with students' families. So teachers might email families or talk on the phone with them. Okay, and now it's time for your activity sheet. So for today's activity, you are going to be sorting some responsibilities and deciding whether or not they're student responsibilities or teacher responsibilities. So you can find this sheet. There are actually 3 pages to this activity. You'll find it in your Google Classroom if you're learning from home. Your teacher will give it to you if you're learning in school. The directions say, cut out eggs and glue them into the correct nest. Let's read them together. Ready? Read it with me. The first one says, help students learn. Would that be a teacher responsibility? Or would that be a student responsibility to help students learn? What do you think? That would be a teacher responsibility, right? Although we do help as students help other students learn too, but that's the main responsibility of a teacher, to help students learn. Clean up after yourself. Whose responsibility is that? Yeah, that's a student responsibility. Although again, teachers also clean up after themselves. Have lessons and work ready. Participate in class. Follow rules. Work with parents. Okay, so you're going to cut these eggs out, and then you're going to paste them into the correct nest. This nest says teacher responsibilities, and this nest says student responsibilities. Now, if you have time, you can also color these pages in. You could color the nest, you could color the eggs. Okay? I really enjoyed learning with you today. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson as much as I did, and I hope that you go on to be very responsible students, because I know that you will, first graders. I've heard from your teachers, and I've heard that you're very, very responsible. So keep that up. See you next time.